Iceland, country number 60. I've been wanting to visit here for years. My plan was to rent a cute little mini Jeep and circumnavigate the island. I'd stop along the way, see whatever there was to see, and just take my time. You wouldn't think it'd be possible to feel rushed during a 2.5-month trip, but with such a long way to go and lots to see, you'd be surprised. Unfortunately, fate had different plans. First, the car. I'd specifically reserved a Suzuki Jimny. These are very popular in Iceland, and they're smaller and cheaper than an actual Jeep. They're also adorably chunky with these big round headlights. I was very excited to explore in such a cool vehicle. Instead, I got a Dacia Duster. These SUVs, built in Romania by Renault, are bland, boring, and in this specific case, a rusted beater that was easily the most dangerous vehicle I've ever driven. The windshield wipers barely worked, the brakes squealed under use, and under heavy braking, the whole thing would just lurch to the right. It had a manual transmission, which I prefer, but shifting felt like stirring peanut butter. Literally the only good thing about this piece of stuff was the heated seats, which I think were powered by their own separate nuclear reactor. Surely, you're probably thinking, I asked for a different vehicle. And you're right, I did. And I was told that this was the only vehicle they had. And they told me this while standing next to no less than 75 other identical Dacia Dusters. So yeah, yay. Just driving from the airport to the hotel, I immediately knew I had to change my plans. There was just no way I'd feel comfortable driving out into the more remote regions of this country in a vehicle that felt like it was held together by zip ties and hate. The other factor was the weather. Now, I grew up in the Northeast, went to college on the planet Hoth, and I've gotten more than my fill of cold weather. I moved to LA after college, partly for the career opportunities, but mostly because of the weather. Nearly all my adventures since I started my extended travels have been to warmer climates. For the first few years, I specifically went to the southern hemisphere in January to get away from even California's mild winters. Now look, I knew Iceland was going to be cold. I knew that I'd be arriving there in the late autumn. I'd even been lugging a warm jacket and thermal layers through the soul-melting heat of Bali and Qatar. But even that was barely enough. An Icelandic fall is colder than an LA winter, that's for sure. But I wasn't going to let either of these things ruin my trip. Modify them, maybe. Scale them down, perhaps. A bigger issue was what the actual weather was planning for the coming days and weeks, but I'll get to that. Knowing I'd have limited time, I wasted none, heading out right away to start exploring. The capital and largest city in Iceland, Reykjavik, is adorably small. With a population of 140,000, it's barely larger than some of the neighborhoods of LA. There's a stunning mixture of classic and new architecture. Everywhere are celebrations of their Viking heritage. There weren't a lot of people walking around, revealing that the locals know more about this weather than I do. From here I headed east, to a national park that has probably the coolest name of any national park in the world, Thingvellir. This park was the site of the annual parliamentary meeting of the Althing, which started in the year 930 and continued all the way to 1798, after which it moved to Reykjavik. It's a stunning landscape, with sharp black rocks seeming to erupt from the ground. Waterfalls and streams cut through the low vegetation, fighting against the cold and the receding sun. It's a landscape built by geologic violence. This is where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates rub shoulders, and the resulting heat, pressure, and movement explains why this part of Iceland, and Iceland as a whole, looks the way it does. I booked into the Mini Borger Cottages and Restaurant, a small hotel that offered tiny cabins just east of the park. It was here, on one of the only clear nights during my entire trip, I saw the Aurora Borealis. Also called the Northern Lights, these magnificent light shows in the sky are caused by particles from the sun dancing around in the upper atmosphere. Knowing what they are doesn't make them any less amazing. Silent, delicate ribbons of a supernatural green. They're easy to see with the naked eye and with slow shutter speed photography, but even with some decent camera gear, they were barely visible on video. Oh well. As cold as I was, I stayed outside for nearly an hour until they faded back into nothingness. Incredible. This was actually the second time I'd seen the Northern Lights. In college, on a similarly cold night, my roommate came back from work around 3 a.m., turning all the lights on in the apartment and yelling at me to wake up. He dragged me outside and we sat in his car with the heat blasting as we watched the lights above Lake Cayuga. It's pretty rare to see aurora that far south. Both times I felt awestruck and extremely lucky. It was at this point my Iceland trip took a several-day pause. A heavy storm was working its way down from the Arctic, and a travel advisory had dropped on the entire country. They advised people to stay indoors and not drive. Given the balding tires on my rental, I didn't need much convincing. Now I've hunkered down through some storms in my life, and this one doesn't even rank in the top 10. But I'm no dummy. If the locals are staying inside, I'm staying inside. Fortunately, the hotel's restaurant was good, and I'd stocked up on food the day before. Once the storm abated, I continued my exploration. There are beautiful waterfalls, hot springs, and geysers all over. But that doesn't even cover all the beautiful sights you can see just from driving around. Rolling hills of dark gold grass give way to spiky, snow-capped peaks. Perfectly still water and tiny, mirror-like lakes. It all felt desolate. Occasionally you'd encounter a car or pass a farm, but it all felt exceptionally remote. Nothing but the hum of the tires and the roar of the heater, and if you stopped, silence.
Forbidden hot tub.
The enormous staircase-like Gullfoss waterfall is one of the most photographed in Iceland. It flows through a canyon and looks epic, if you can see it. The freezing spray meant I couldn't get anywhere near it without my glasses getting completely covered in water. Then there was the Seljalandsfoss Falls. I'm sorry for butchering these names. The spray there was an issue too, but for a different reason. It hit the ground and froze, adding an inch-deep layer of ice to the sidewalk and the ground nearby. Everyone was slip-sliding away. But amazingly, I didn't fall. Then there was the Solheimajökull Glacier in southern Iceland. This massive amount of snow and ice is part of one of the largest in Europe. It's also a bit of a hike to get out there, largely because, like nearly all glaciers, it has receded significantly in the last few decades. Then, on my last day with good weather, Reynis Trunker It's an endless beach of black sand, highlighted by hexagonal basalt columns. These otherworldly structures look like the opposite puzzle piece from Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. Trace the movements of the continents back a few million years and it's easy to see why. But then weather once again descended, and me and my unexpectedly reliable companion started heading back towards Reykjavik. I stopped at the geothermal energy exhibition at the Hellisheidi power station. Geothermal power is extremely successful in Iceland for obvious reasons. I also made a quick stop at the tourist trap bridge between continents, which supposedly lets you walk between the Eurasian and North American plates. This isn't exactly true, but it's a cool visual and thankfully it's free. I found a few hours of sun on my last afternoon and I was able to walk along part of the coast, before then heading back to the city and my second to last flight of this trip. Up next, Boston, or more specifically, New Hampshire, home to my kin and where I grew up. Time to see my folks and take part in a very special day. One last epic sight on the flight, though, the pristine, snow-covered Greenland, a sight I hadn't expected to see, lit perfectly in the setting sun. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.